Welcome to the Marketing Behind Rapid Growth, the podcast where we explore the strategies, decisions, and growth engines behind some of the world's most successful technology companies. Today we're talking about Asana. Picture this. It's 2008. You're sitting inside one of the fastest growing companies on the planet. Facebook is connecting millions of people a month. The product is a marvel of viral engineering, but behind the scenes, something is broken. Spreadsheets everywhere, status meetings that eat entire afternoons, email threads that fork into chaos. The very people building the future of human connection can't coordinate their own work. That contradiction is where our story begins, because the person sitting in the middle of that mess wasn't a junior employee. It was Dustin Moskovitz, co-founder and first CTO of Facebook, and what he noticed would eventually become a multi-billion-dollar bet on the future of work itself. Let's get into it. Part 1. The problem. Nobody was solving. Moskovitz had a front row seat to something remarkable. The internet had made individuals dramatically more productive. A single person with a laptop could now do the work of 10, but organizations hadn't kept pace. Teams were still drowning in what Moskovitz called work about work. Not the actual creative or strategic labor, but the administrative overhead required just to know who's doing what, by when, and why. So he left Facebook, not to chase another social network, but to chase a much harder problem, organizational coordination. He brought along Justin Rosenstein, an engineer he'd worked with at Facebook. Together, they built a simple hypothesis. If you could map the relationships between people, tasks, and goals in a structured way, collaboration wouldn't have to be painful. That hypothesis became Asana. Part 2. The architecture that changed everything. Here's where the story gets strategically interesting. Because Asana's biggest advantage wasn't a clever feature or a catchy interface, it was a decision about data. Most work tools at the time, and honestly, many still today, treat work like a filing cabinet. Rows in a spreadsheet, cards on a board, containers that hold information but don't understand it. Asana took a different approach. They built what they call the work graph. Not a container, but an object-oriented model of work itself. In this model, a task isn't just an entry on a list. It's a node in a living map, one that captures the who, the what, the why, and the when across an entire organization. This might sound like a technical detail. It isn't. It's the single decision that would let Asana compete nearly 2 decades later in an entirely different era of computing. But before any of that could matter, Asana had to win a much smaller battle first. Part 3. Winning in single-player mode. Moskovitz had a rule. A coordination tool has to be faster than a text editor. Why does that matter? Because if an individual user doesn't find value in the tool for their own personal work, they will never bring it to their team. No one adopts a company-wide platform because a mandate says so. They adopt it because it made their Tuesday morning easier. So Asana obsessed over friction. Keyboard shortcuts, instant task capture, an interface built for speed, not spectacle. This is a lesson worth sitting with. Asana didn't try to win organizations first and trickle down to individuals. They won individuals first and let organizations follow. Part 4. Marketing built into the product. Once Asana had that individual foothold, something interesting happened. The product itself became a distribution engine. When someone added a guest or a contractor to a project, they weren't just delegating a task. They were introducing a total stranger to the product. Every invite was a tiny act of marketing built directly into the daily workflow. This is product-led growth in its purest form. Not a free trial bolted onto a sales funnel, but viral loops stitched into the fabric of how the tool actually works. But Asana's marketing didn't stop at virality. The company invested heavily in content, first through a publication called Wavelength, and later through a research arm called the Work Innovation Lab. The goal wasn't traffic for its own sake. It was thought leadership, positioning Asana as an authority on the actual science of work. That meant showing up exactly when a manager was wrestling with a concrete problem, launching a campaign, onboarding a new hire. Asana wanted to be there with an answer, right at the moment intent was forming. Bottom-up adoption, top-down credibility. That combination let Asana expand from small teams into much larger footholds. Part 5. Growing up and selling up. But bottom-up growth alone doesn't win the enterprise. At some point, a champion inside a company isn't enough. you need a signature on a much bigger contract. So Asana layered a direct sales motion on top of its product-led engine. This is a hybrid model. The viral individual adoption never went away. But now there were also high-touch sales teams, walking into boardrooms and pitching the work graph directly to executives who were increasingly worried about something very specific: app sprawl and the absence of a single source of truth. That combination, product virality, feeding the top of the funnel, sales expertise closing at the top of the org chart, became the engine for Asana's next phase of growth. Part 6. The painful, necessary pause. Now here's where the story takes a turn that a lot of growth narratives conveniently skip. In the mid-2000s, Asana hit a wall. The original architecture, brilliant as it was, started straining under the weight of enterprise-scale usage. Larger customers were pushing the platform past its limits. And the company faced an agonizing choice: keep shipping new features to stay competitive, or stop and rebuild the core of the platform from the ground up. In a hyper-competitive software market, pausing feature development for a multi-year rebuild is the kind of decision that kills companies. Competitors don't wait. Customers don't wait. But Moskowitz made the call anyway. He prioritized structural integrity over short-term market position. Endurance over momentum. It was a bet on the long game, and it paid off. That rebuilt foundation is what eventually let Asana support deployments serving hundreds of thousands of users at once. This is a strategic lesson that rarely gets its due credit. Sometimes the most important growth decision is the one that looks, from the outside, like standing still. Part 7. Going public, and a new kind of discipline. Asana went public in 2020, choosing a direct listing rather than a traditional IPO. And then the broader market shifted. The post-pandemic correction hit growth stage tech companies hard, and Asana wasn't immune. The company had to pivot from growth at any cost towards something more disciplined, profitable, sustainable growth. And then in 2025 came a genuinely landmark moment. Moskowitz stepped down as CEO, moving into the chairman role. In his place came Dan Rogers, previously CEO of LaunchDarkly, and notably a former chief marketing officer at ServiceNow. That background matters. Rogers wasn't just an operator, he was a marketer stepping into the top seat at exactly the moment Asana needed to redefine what it was selling. His mandate was clear: evolve Asana from a work management tool into something much bigger, what the company now calls the operating system for human agent teams. Part 8. The third wave. To understand where Asana is headed, it helps to understand how the company frames its own history. Asana describes work transformation in 3 waves. Wave 1. The shift from analog to digital. Wave 2. The shift from simple project management to full work management. Wave 3. The one we're living through right now, the arrival of the agentic enterprise. Asana's diagnosis of this moment is sharp. They call it the AI gap. Individuals are becoming dramatically more productive using large language models to write code, draft emails, summarize documents. But that productivity isn't translating into organizational gains. Why? Because most companies have simply bolted AI onto their existing workflows as a chatbot. Rogers has a memorable term for the result: shelfware, expensive licenses, purchased with enthusiasm, sitting unused. Part 9. AI as teammate, not tool. Asana's answer to the AI gap is a specific bet. AI shouldn't be a tool you occasionally query. It should function as a teammate. That's the thinking behind AI Studio and AI Teammates. And here's where that early architectural decision, the work graph, becomes essential again, nearly 2 decades later. Because these AI agents run directly on the work graph, they inherit something most AI tools simply don't have: persistent memory and real organizational context. They're not answering isolated questions in a vacuum. They understand dependencies. They can flag a project at risk before a human notices. They learn from feedback over time. This is the payoff of architecture as strategy. A data model built in 2008 to help individuals manage their own tasks is now the foundation for autonomous agents managing enterprise-wide workflows in 2026. Part 10. Marketing for the age of AI search. Of course, a product shift this significant demands a marketing shift to match. As AI reshapes how people find information online, and as answer engines absorb traffic that used to flow through traditional search, Asana has adapted its own visibility strategy. The company has moved away from broad search terms and toward what marketers now call answer engine optimization, targeting high-intent vertical use cases rather than generic keywords. The positioning has shifted too. Asana isn't presenting itself as software anymore. It's presenting itself as a programmable operating layer for the modern company. That's a significant repositioning. It's the difference between selling a tool and selling infrastructure. Part 11, the lessons. So what can growth leaders actually take from Asana's story? First, architecture is destiny. Asana's ability to compete in the AI era traces directly back to a data model decision made at the company's founding. If your data lives in silos, your AI will too. The infrastructure choices you make early can either open doors or close them years down the line. Second, culture can be a product. Moskovitz treated Asana's internal culture, mindfulness practices, rejecting false trade-offs, even no meeting Wednesdays, not as a perk, but as a genuine driver of business performance. Culture, in this telling, is what builds the endurance needed to survive high-growth environments without burning out. Third, and maybe most important, marketing and product must co-evolve. Asana didn't use one growth strategy forever. They matched their marketing to their product's actual stage. Product-led growth to gain a foothold, a hybrid sales model to win the enterprise. And now, AI-era discovery strategies to stay visible in a completely reshaped search landscape. Conclusion. As of early 2026, Asana is focused on stabilizing revenue retention and expanding margins while reallocating resources toward AI research and development. Its roughly $75 million acquisition of Stack AI, a no-code AI agent builder, along with new purpose-built applications for service management and developer workflows, signals a broader shift. Asana is moving from a horizontal productivity tool toward a verticalized platform for building and running AI agents. But strip away the technology, and the mission is exactly what it was back in 2008. Help teams work together with less friction. The tools have changed dramatically. Text boxes and list views have given way to autonomous agents and consumption-based pricing. But the strategic core hasn't moved an inch. Asana's wager now as much as ever is that clarity wins. And in the age of the agentic enterprise, that clarity will come from one place: orchestrating humans and AI agents together across the work graph. This was the marketing behind rapid growth. See you in the next episode.